Okay, so yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to listen to my talk today. I'm really happy because we've already heard so many very interesting talks by some very esteemed scholars. So I hope that I can just give even a small percentage of that same quality for you today. So yes, my name is James Loftus. I'm a PhD candidate and JSPS Research Fellow at Kyushu University in Fukuoka, Japan. And today I hope to shed, Today I hope to shed a little bit of light on the agricultural transitional period of the Japanese archipelago. And I will show some results of geometric morphometric analysis on over 200 recovered vessels from mortuary sites across the Northern Kyushu Island region, as well as introduce some new 3D morphometric mapping technologies that I am currently using in the study of ceramics. So I hope you enjoy. Actually, this study is just a small portion of a larger PhD research project, which is fully funded by the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science. And the main purpose, the main purpose of this project is to basically extrapolate relative standardization trends of pottery form during agricultural transitional periods. And because of this, there are several basic goals of this research project, but I won't bore you too much. But in general, I hope to compare mortuary pottery and daily use pottery in several categories, such as learning strategies or the process of standardization, idiosyncratic style, through the lens of 2D geometric morphometrics and 3D morphometric mapping. And this is done through a case study of the Jomon to Yayoi agricultural transitional period in the Japanese archipelago. So we've already heard a lot about the Jomon period today, which I'm very happy about. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the period that precedes it, which is the Yayoi period. The Yayoi period is understood as a kind of agriculture, the start of agriculture in the Japanese archipelago. In a basic term, the Japanese archipelago has been continually inhabited since Paleolithic times, and it has had multiple periods of large inter-island and inter-regional migrations over this long history. And preceding the very recognizable wet rice cultivation society of the Middle Yayoi period is what is called the Jomon period, as we've already heard, which is a long-lasting, multi-dimensional period of long-lasting hunter-gatherer societies. The transition to agriculture, in fact, was brought by multiple waves of migration from the Korean Peninsula. This time overlaps with a period of climatic cooling and as well as some regional tensions in surrounding areas, with scholars assuming that due to these two regions, migrants carrying agricultural culture moved across the sea strait into Kyushu Islands in the Japanese archipelago in the 9th to 8th century BC. And from then, in the 6th to 5th century BC, this agricultural society was developed and spread across Western Japan. At the same time, there was an increase in population density, a centralization into plains regions, and some degree of pottery standardization as well. Well, actually, as I mentioned, agriculture was first introduced into what we know as the Northern Kyushu region of the Kyushu Islands in the southwest of Japan. This region is a very diverse region, but it can be broken down into 6 main subregions. The introduction of rice cultivation was done in the 9th to 8th century BC into the Itoshima and Karatsu subregions of this Northern Kyushu region. Following this, there was a secondary wave of migrants in the 7th to 6th century BC into the Fukuoka Plain region. This Fukuoka Plain region is understood as a kind of main plains region in this period. It is said by Miyamoto that in this Fukuoka Plain region, Yayoi culture was developed and rice agriculture culture was really developed in this area and moved into Western Japan in 6th to 5th century BC. However, this does leave us with some questions on the material cultural side, for example, can we actually see a quantifiable decrease in this morphological variance of pottery in this standardized culture as we see? And are there any idiosyncratic traces of differential style within this, what we call a standardized system? So this is what I would like to talk about today. The pot that I have chosen to talk about today is what we call the Tsubo Globular Pot. The Tsubo is a mortuary vessel that has its roots in the late Mumun culture of the Korean Peninsula. The Tsubo is around 10 to 17 centimeters in height, often undecorated, but you can still see some firing patterns on the surface of the pot. And these characteristics written here are all characteristic of this very small and cute pottery style. The depositional context is in a multitude of different burials during this time period, such as jar burials, pits, and dolmens. And the production method is very traditional in that it is banded or slabbed and without the use of turntables or the potter's wheel. So we can see some differential curvature due to this. This study utilizes 213 samples across 32 sites in the Northern Kyushu region, as expressed in this distribution map. The methods that I use and will be showcasing today are two: geometric morphometrics using 2D outline analysis and 3D morphometric mapping. I hope to create a kind of cohesive mix between these two, and I will explain them a little bit more in a little bit. So just jumping straight into the results of geometric morphometrics, after the 2D outlines of these 213 vessels are normalized and submitted to elliptical Fourier analysis, the main areas of morphological variance becomes very clear. Well, unsurprisingly, for those working in ceramics, I think, the flared neck region of the pot accounts for the highest variance, which is PC1, 31.2%, with the shape of the globular body instead coming in at PC2 at 22.7%. Looking at kernel density contours, it's expressed on the outlines, we can see this very clearly, having the upper half of the vessel having a larger range of variance. Furthermore, looking at the results of the actual PCs themselves, so this is PC1, PC2, we do see that distribution curves. The distribution of PC1, the upper half of the vessel, is quite larger than that of the lower half of the vessel. And this is also seen through the morphological stages as well. This is temporal morphological stages. We can see that in earlier stages, stage 1, that the distribution of the PCs themselves, PC scores, is much wider and gradually becomes more of a standardized and normal distribution. In terms of temporality, over time, over this agricultural transitional period, we do see some of a decrease in the variance after the very initial stages. And even in the morpho space, we can see this green color here of the initial stage versus this blue of the latest stage. The degree of variance does quite narrow, as we can see temporally. Well, what about spatially? Spatially as well, we see that plains regions tend to have a lower degree of comparable variance as compared to coastal regions, for example, as expressed in these graphs as well. So what does this all mean? Well, we see an increase in the population density, especially moving from coastal regions into plains regions during this transitional period. And during this time in plains regions, we do see what looks like an increase in the standardization of pottery form. Could be connected to intensified production or specialization, or even differential learning methods such as a centralized small group apprenticeship. However, my question is, are there any actual visible idiosyncratic variants within what we see as a standardizing system? So this is where the 3D comes in. In order to test intra-bezel variation, so this is very small scale, very minute traces of variation, I utilize 3D morphometric mapping, as it's called. This is a kind of new novel way to look at ceramics. It starts with, of course, mesh manipulation through post-processing orientation. I utilize actually point clouds as my main source of this 3D method. And through the use of point clouds, we can actually take a look, we can take a look at point clouds in a kind of different way than we can with normal mesh. In this state, we can actually unroll the point cloud into a semi-3D state, as we call it. Not 3D, but looks kind of flat. And from this, we can see differential curvature on the face of the pot. And by projecting scalar fields onto the surface of the pot itself, we can see differential degrees of curvature from one axis. And for example, this inward curvature of the lip is the furthest point away from this axis. So that's why we see it as a yellow color. In this example, on the surface of the actual body of the pot, we see two areas of blue outward curvature on what would be opposite sides of the pot. So in this case, it seems like that this pot is not actually fully round, but could be a bit of an oblong shape. Looking at 2D representation of this, it's very clear the differential regions of curvature on the pot. If we compare between an early Yayoi Tsubo example, archaeological example, and a mass manufactured model, we can actually see the very stark differences in what a machine makes versus what is made by an actual potter. So this kind of new way of looking at 3D ceramics has many advantages because we can see a holistic idea of the visualization of outward curvature, inward outward curvature, and we can quickly determine the areas, main areas of curvature on the pot, even through something like contour extraction through polyline drawing. You can see these kind of mountains and valleys of curvature. However, outside of this body area, it's quite difficult to actually see other areas of curvature on the pot, which, as we know, the top half of the pot has the most variance in form. So how can we see that? Well, actually, I developed a separate method to use in tandem with morphometric mapping called slice segmental extraction. The way of using is almost the same. However, this point cloud is actually split into 5mm slices, which you can see here. Each is 5mm wide. And the projection of this topographic kind of mapping is done on each slice individually. From this, we can actually see more clearly the actual degree of variation in the curvature of pottery, for example, on this upper half of the lip and neck area. This is actually very easily seen through this, what we call a kame cooking jar. There are, you can see the banding slabs here that are left a little untreated, not smoothed out completely. And as an archaeologist working in ceramics, you may be able to see this curvature but using the naked eye, but showing this is kind of difficult. Even with morphometric mapping, it's not quite clear to see these bands. However, using slice segmental extraction, you can see the curvature of these bands very clearly utilizing this method. So I'll try to hurry up as much as I can. I will showcase just quickly the outcome of one case study of the Shimotsuki-guma Tenjin Mori site, which is located in the Fukuoka Plain region, which is actually one of the most standardized sites in terms of pottery that we see during this period. And yes, these are the samples that I utilize, but I'll be moving kind of quickly through it. Looking at both morphometric mapping and slice segmental extraction, we can see very clearly, despite the pottery being of very similar time period and very similar shape and style, which in geometric morphometrics would clump in the same morphological group, we can see that there are clear differences between the style in which the pots are made. For example, this T9 sample, compared to others, has very little outward and inward curvature, which may suggest that this pot was made by a more skilled potter. So in summary, while 2D geometric morphometrics does show us that there is a general decrease in the variance, increase of the standardization of pottery form during this transitional period, despite this, in these standardized plains regions, we do see some kind of idiosyncratic style in the pottery, this standardized pottery coming out. And I believe that 3D morphometric mapping can show this very clearly. Yes, in the future, I hope to include, of course, daily use pottery, incorporation of ethnographic examples, hopefully, to build a clear model, and to also compare to wheel-thrown examples from other parts of the world. I really believe this modeling can be used in any ceramic context. So yes, I hope to use this in every context I can. So this is all I have time for today. So thank you so much for your kind attention, and thank you to the CAA organizing committee and Dr. Wang, of course, for this fantastic opportunity. So thank you so much.